My ex used to handcuff us together while we slept with the key in a locked box. After I escaped, he got my new boyfriend fired by sending his classified military records to his boss and threatened his 10-year-old nephew. So I created a fake nurse named Sophie to catfish him and documented everything until he lost his mind and got himself arrested, breaking into a library looking for her. My ex used to handcuff us together when we went to sleep, and I don't mean that in the cute metaphorical he wants us together forever kind of way. I mean that in the literal key in a box, I didn't know the code to kind of way. I only managed to escape when he decided to trust me enough to leave me in the house alone while he went to the corner store. I ran and never looked back. I always worried he'd track me down and unalive me, but that never happened. Until 2 years later when I found it in me to date again. The guy I was seeing had randomly ghosted me, and when I messaged him about it a month later for my own closure, he told me it's because my ex told him who I really am. My blood went cold. I instantly packed my things and moved. 6 months later, I was in another talking stage with a new guy, and after a few amazing dates, he also ghosted me. This time it was because my ex showed up to his workplace with pictures of his family and friendly advised him to stop talking to me. I went to the police about it, but they said that without further proof, there was no way to know if this was just a harmless joke taken seriously. I felt defeated, scared, and so I packed up in country. I met a guy named Tom there a year later. I hadn't heard of my ex, and since Tom was ex-military, I thought it would be okay. But I was wrong. 3 weeks after me and Tom got together, I hadn't even made a social media post about it, and my ex started visiting Tom's mother at her nursing home. She had dementia, and my ex would bring her flowers, telling her her son was dating an intimacy worker who would give her son diseases. As if that wasn't bad enough, he got Tom fired by sending his classified military records to his employer with anonymous notes about Tom being unstable. We woke up to Tom's car windows smashed a few days later. The seats were covered in pictures of Tom's family members going about their daily lives. His 16-year-old sister at the grocery store, his 10-year-old nephew is leaving school. We of course went to the police, and they were about as useful as you'd expect. Without proof, we have no idea who did it. My blood boiled, and when my ex approached Tom's nephew after school, Tom broke. He told me he loved me but couldn't put his family in danger anymore. I left that night, not because he asked me to, but because I realized my ex would never stop. He'd already escalated to threatening children, and police were doing nothing about it. Someone was going to get hurt, and it's while staying in a cheap motel that night that I realized something. My ex's obsession was a weakness I could exploit, and so I disappeared completely. New phone, no social media. I let Jake think he'd won. For 2 months, I studied him from fake accounts. I'd never looked at them before because of PTSD, but this time I forced myself to, and I saw just how pathetic he was. Desperate for validation. An incel. No driver's license at 29. This was the slimy vermin I was letting control my life. Not anymore. That's why I created Sophie. You see, Sophie was everything Jake wanted. A nurse who did yoga and believed in traditional values. She lived one town over and had escaped an abusive ex. I built her profile carefully using edited pictures of myself. She looked like me, just ever so slightly more in shape, and that made Jake feral for her. Sophie liked one of Jake's gym photos, and within a day, he messaged her. I kept the conversations light but engaging. I made him work for every response. After 2 weeks, he asked her out. Sophie said yes, but admitted she was nervous about meeting someone online after her toxic ex. Of course, Jake immediately went into protector mode, telling Sophie to take all the time she needs. For 4 months, I strung him along. Sophie would agree to dates, then cancel last minute. Food poisoning, car trouble, emergency at the hospital. Each time, Jake grew more desperate. His messages went from clear and mannered to long, rambling voice notes about how the universe was keeping them apart, how she was special, how he'd wait forever. The day Sophie agreed to meet him and Pinky promised today she would, Jake took off work. He got a haircut, bought new clothes, posted about how today would change everything. I sent him to a coffee shop parking lot 2 hours away and had him wait. He sat there for 3 hours, sending increasingly frantic texts. Are you close? Did something happen? Please just let me know you're okay. I'll wait as long as it takes. Finally, Sophie sent, I'm sorry. I can't do this. It's not you. I'm just not ready. Please don't contact me again. Jake lost it. 17 calls in a row. Voice messages crying and begging. When Sophie didn't respond, he started threatening to end himself. Then came the rage. Messages calling her every name imaginable. Threats to find her, to make her pay. I screenshot everything and blocked him. He made a second account that night just to send me videos of himself in the bathroom holding sharp objects against himself. It was traumatizing, but deserved. However, there was one thing that stood out. His final video, he told Sophie he was coming to find her, that he'd found people before, and that it wouldn't be too hard to do it again. That video haunted me, but I knew I couldn't let fear paralyze me again. Jake had just admitted on camera that he'd tracked people down before. My hands trembled as I saved every screenshot, every voice message, every threat. This time would be different. This time I had evidence. I spent the next 3 days in that motel room, barely sleeping, constantly checking the parking lot through the blinds. Every car that pulled in made my heart race, but Jake didn't show up. Not yet. He was too busy flooding Sophie's blocked account with messages from new profiles, each more desperate than the last. On the 4th day, I made my move. I created a new account for Sophie's best friend, Catherine, and reached out to Jake. Catherine was worried about Sophie, hadn't heard from her since their coffee date plans. Jake latched onto this immediately, bombarding Catherine with questions. Where did Sophie live? What was her last name? Did she mention him? Catherine played dumb at first, then slowly revealed she was concerned too. Sophie had mentioned meeting someone online but had been secretive about it. Jake offered to help find her, insisting something terrible must have happened. Catherine agreed to meet him at a diner to discuss it. I watched from across the street as Jake showed up 30 minutes early, pacing outside, checking his phone obsessively. When Catherine didn't show, he waited 2 2 hours before finally leaving. The rage texts started immediately, this time directed at Catherine, accusing her of being in on some conspiracy. That's when I knew I had him. His paranoia was consuming him, making him sloppy. He was posting publicly about Sophie now, sharing her photos, asking if anyone had seen her. His friends were starting to comment, concerned about his behavior. One even suggested he should talk to someone professional. I documented everything meticulously. Every post, every comment, every increasingly unhinged theory he shared about Sophie being a catfish or worse. His gym check-ins became erratic. His work posts disappeared entirely. He was unraveling. 2 weeks into this, something unexpected happened. Tom called me. He'd been thinking about everything that happened, he explained. His family was safe now, moved to a new area. His sister was in college out of state. His nephew's family had relocated for his dad's job. And Tom? He'd been doing his own research on Jake. Tom had found something interesting. Jake's pattern went back years. There were old social media posts from other women, similar stories of harassment and stalking. Most had gone private or deleted their accounts, but Tom had screenshots. Jake had done this at least 4 times before me. We spent hours on the phone comparing notes. Tom had used his military connections to dig deeper, finding forum posts where Jake bragged about his techniques for finding people. He'd even written a guide on a pickup artist forum about how to track down women who ghosted you. The level of detail was disturbing, but it also gave us an advantage. We knew his playbook now. Tom suggested we work together. He'd already started building a case file, organizing everything chronologically. He'd even found Jake's work information and discovered he'd been calling in sick frequently since Sophie disappeared. His coworkers were noticing. His boss was asking questions. I hesitated at first. Getting Tom involved again felt dangerous, but he assured me his family was safe now, and he wanted to help end this once and for all. Not through violence or legal channels that had already failed us, but through something more effective: complete exposure. We spent the next week planning carefully. Tom reached out to some of the other women Jake had stalked, the ones he'd found traces of online. 2 agreed to share their stories anonymously. One had police reports from years ago. Another had saved threatening voicemails that sounded eerily similar to the ones he'd left Sophie. Meanwhile, I kept Jake spiraling. Sophie's social media disappeared completely, but Catherine kept popping up in places Jake frequented online, always just out of reach. She'd like one of his posts, then vanish. Comment on a mutual friend's photo, then delete it. Just enough to keep him searching, keep him posting publicly about his theories. Jake started showing up at hospitals in neighboring towns, asking about a nurse named Sophie. Security cameras caught him loitering in parking lots. One hospital even filed a complaint when he tried to access employee directories. He was creating a paper trail of his own obsession. Tom and I worked in shifts, making sure one of us was always monitoring Jake's online activity. We used VPNs, fake accounts, careful digital hygiene. Tom's military training proved invaluable for operational security. We weren't just documenting anymore, we were building something bigger. The breakthrough came when Jake posted a rambling video on his main account. He looked disheveled, exhausted, manic. He talked about Sophie, about me, about how women were all connected in some conspiracy against him. He mentioned specific details about stalking me, about showing up at Tom's work, about threatening children. All of it recorded, public, undeniable. His friends' comments shifted from concern to alarm. Several unfriended him. His gym banned him after he had a breakdown in the locker room, screaming about Sophie to anyone who would listen. His carefully constructed image was crumbling, but Jake wasn't done. In his desperation, he made a critical mistake. He posted Sophie's photos on a reverse image search forum, offering money for information about her real identity. He included details about how he'd tracked down other women before, specific techniques he'd used. He was essentially confessing to serial stalking in a public forum. Tom screenshot everything before it could be deleted. We had him dead to rights now, but we needed to be strategic about how to use it. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about protection, not just for me, but for every woman Jake might target in the future. That's when Nathan reached out to us. He was a friend of one of Jake's former victims, a guy who worked in IT and had been following Jake's online meltdown. He offered to help us compile everything into a comprehensive file, not for the police, who had already proven useless, but for something more effective. Nathan suggested we create a warning system, a documented archive of Jake's behavior that could be shared with women he might target. It would include his photos, his techniques, his patterns, everything a potential victim would need to recognize and avoid him. It wasn't illegal. Not gonna lie, seeing Catherine stand Jake up at that diner really shows how brave she's being to be able to help protect other women from him. We all need a Nathan in our lives. It wasn't harassment, it was just information, freely shared. We spent days organizing years of evidence. Tom handled the technical side, ensuring everything was properly archived and backed up. Nathan built a simple website that could be easily found by searching Jake's name. I wrote the warnings, keeping them factual, documented, indisputable. The site included Jake's own words, his own posts, his own admissions, screenshots of him describing how he found addresses, how he gathered information on families, how he approached victims' loved ones. It was all there in his own digital footprint, but we weren't ready to launch yet. We needed one more thing. Jake had to know that Sophie was never real, that he'd been played, not through a message or a reveal, but through his own deduction. It would eat at him more that way, destroy the fantasy he'd built around her. So I planted breadcrumbs. Catherine mentioned Sophie's ex in a comment, describing him in terms that sounded suspiciously like Jake. Sophie's old posts, cached on archive sites, started showing inconsistencies, photos that didn't quite match up, details that contradicted each other, just enough for someone obsessively searching to notice. Jake found them, of course. His posts became frantic, theories about Sophie being fake, about being targeted, about a conspiracy against him. But who would believe him now? He'd already destroyed his credibility with weeks of public meltdowns. His friends were gone. His job was in jeopardy. His His reputation was in ruins. The beautiful irony was that Jake was right. Sophie was fake. He had been targeted. There was a conspiracy against him, but no one would ever believe the boy who cried wolf. Not after everything he'd posted. He'd trapped himself in his own web of obsession. Tom and I watched as Jake's online presence exploded, then imploded. He deleted accounts, created new ones, posted increasingly unhinged rants about being set up. Each new post just added to our archive. Each breakdown further proved the warnings we'd compiled were necessary. 3 months after I'd created Sophie, Jake had effectively destroyed his own life. No violence needed. No legal intervention required. Just his own obsession turned against him. He'd lost his job after too many absences. His gym membership was revoked. His social circle had abandoned him. All because he couldn't let go of a woman who never existed. But we weren't done yet. The website was ready, but launching it was a big step. Once it was out there was no taking it back. Jake would know eventually that I was behind it. The question was whether I was ready for whatever came next. Tom assured me we'd prepared for every contingency. Nathan had set up the site to be virtually untraceable. The other victims had agreed to share their stories anonymously. We had contingency plans, backup documentation, safety protocols in place. Still, I hesitated. Part of me wondered if we were going too far. Then I remembered Tom's nephew, terrified after Jake approached him. I remembered the women before me who'd had to disappear from their own lives. I remembered the handcuffs, the isolation, the fear that had controlled me for so long. No, this ended now. The website went live at midnight. Within hours, Jake found it. His reaction exceeded every prediction we'd made. He created 17 different social media accounts in a single night, each one posting increasingly erratic messages about conspiracies and setups. He recorded videos of himself destroying his apartment, throwing furniture, punching walls until his knuckles bled. The neighbors called the police twice, but Jake managed to calm down enough to send them away both times. Tom monitored Jake's digital footprint while I watched from a safe house Nathan had arranged through a friend. The location was 2 states away, completely off any grid Jake might search. I spent those first days after the launch pacing the small apartment, checking and rechecking our security measures. Jake's attempts to discredit the website began immediately. He filed complaints with hosting services, claiming defamation and harassment. Each complaint was dismissed when the companies reviewed the evidence. Everything on the site came from Jake's own posts and admissions. He tried hiring a lawyer, but 3 different firms declined to take his case after reviewing the documentation. The real escalation began when Jake started reaching out to my old contacts. He found coworkers from jobs I'd held years ago, distant relatives I barely spoke to, even my high school teachers. His messages to them were carefully crafted at first, presenting himself as a concerned ex trying to help me through a mental health crisis. When that didn't work, he switched tactics. Jake created elaborate fake social media profiles, impersonating therapists and counselors who claimed I was their patient. These profiles would reach out to my acquaintances with concerns about my stability. Tom caught most of these attempts early, documenting each fake profile and adding them to our growing archive. One morning, I woke to find Jake had discovered something we'd missed, an old blog I'd written in college under a pseudonym. He'd somehow connected it to me through writing style analysis, spending what must have been hundreds of hours comparing posts. He published his findings on multiple forums, trying to paint me as manipulative and unstable based on creative writing pieces I'd done for classes. Nathan worked quickly to address this new development. He created counter-documentation showing the blog's context, class assignments, creative writing exercises, fiction clearly labeled as such. But Jake's obsession with the blog revealed something useful. He was spending 18 to 20 hours a day online, barely sleeping, living off energy drinks and fast food. The physical toll showed in every new video he posted. His appearance deteriorated rapidly. Weight loss, bloodshot eyes, trembling hands. His apartment, visible in the background of his rants, descended into chaos. Garbage piled up, dishes molded in the sink. He'd stopped going to the gym entirely, stopped maintaining any pretense of normal life. Tom identified Jake's next move before it happened. Based on his online searches and forum posts, Jake was trying to find where I might be hiding. He'd developed a theory that I must be staying with one of the other women who'd shared their stories on our website. His process of elimination was methodical but flawed. He assumed we were all connected in some grand conspiracy. We used this to our advantage. Nathan created false data trails suggesting connections between the anonymous contributors that didn't exist, fake social media interactions, doctored metadata on photos, breadcrumbs leading Jake in circles. He spent weeks chasing ghosts, convinced he was close to uncovering our network. During this time, Jake made contact with someone new, a woman named Melissa, who'd responded sympathetically to one of his posts about being catfished. She shared her own story of online deception, and Jake latched onto her immediately. Their conversations escalated quickly, with Jake pouring out his entire story to this understanding ear. Melissa was, of course, another creation. This time, Tom was running the profile. His military background included psychological operations training, and he used it to keep Jake talking. Through Melissa, we learned Jake had been planning something bigger. He'd been saving money, selling possessions, preparing for what he called his final move. The details emerged slowly. Jake believed I was hiding in one of 3 cities based on his flawed analysis. He planned to take a month off. He'd already burned through his vacation days and was preparing to quit his job and search for me systematically. His plan included visiting women's shelters, hospitals, yoga studios, anywhere he thought I might go. We couldn't let him terrorize innocent people in his search. Tom suggested we give Jake what he wanted, a trail to follow. But this trail would lead somewhere specific, somewhere we controlled. Nathan found the perfect location, a small town with limited internet connectivity, one main road in and out, and most importantly, a robust neighborhood watch program. The breadcrumbs were laid carefully. Catherine's account became active again,